$200 million, one ship, and a few dozen people who get to call it home for months at a time. It's one of the most expensive, advanced machines humans have ever built. A floating fortress designed to survive where almost nothing else can. So what does $500 million actually get the people living inside it? The answer is stranger and a little sadder than you'd think. To understand this ship, you have to understand what it's up against. It works in the most punishing environment on the planet, crushing through sea ice meters thick in cold that can kill an exposed person in minutes, thousands of miles from the nearest help. To do that and to keep its crew alive and sane for months, it can't just be a ship. It has to be a self-contained world, one that makes its own power, its own water, its own heat, and everything in between. That's a huge part of why it costs what it costs. But here's the fascinating part. When you spend that kind of money to keep people alive at the ends of the earth, you end up building something that's part warship, part laboratory bank, and part five-star hotel. Stay with me, because the contrast between what's inside and what's outside is the whole story. Start with the price tag. Why does a single ship cost as much as a skyscraper? Because almost everything about it is extreme. The hull is a slab of specially strengthened steel, shaped to ride up onto the ice and crush it with the ship's own weight, built to take a beating that would crumple a normal vessel. Below deck sits enough power to light a small city, just to force this thing through frozen sea. And because there's no help out here, almost every critical system is doubled, tripled, backed up, so that if one thing fails, the ship and everyone on it doesn't. You're not paying for a boat. You're paying for a guarantee that a few dozen people come home from a place that's actively trying to kill them. Which leads to the strangest thing about this ship. It needs almost nothing from the outside world. It generates its own electricity around the clock. It makes its own fresh water from the sea. It heats itself against the cold, treats its own waste, and carries months of food and fuel in its belly. Cut it off from civilization entirely, and it just keeps going. A small, glowing town drifting through a frozen wilderness, completely self-sufficient. For the crew, that means the ship isn't just where they work, it's their power company, their water supply, their supermarket, their hospital, and their home, all fused into one hull. And when you build a machine that has to be all of those things at once, you might as well make it comfortable. And this is where people's jaws drop. Because behind that brutal steel hull, a ship like this can feel less like a workplace and more like a resort. Many carry a sauna, a blistering hot room a few centimeters of steel away from a frozen ocean. Some have a small swimming pool, a proper gym, a cinema room, comfortable lounges, even a library. After a shift out in the killing cold, a crew member can swim, sweat in the sauna, watch a film, and forget for an hour that they're in one of the most hostile places on Earth. It sounds like a luxury. It isn't. On a voyage this long and this isolated, these comforts are what keep the crew's minds intact. Morale isn't a bonus out here. It's a survival system, and it turns out it's one you can buy. Spend enough, and you can keep a human mind steady through months of darkness with nothing but hot water, a treadmill, and a movie night. Then there are the cabins, and they're nicer than you'd expect. On a ship built to house people for months, a cramped bunk isn't good enough. Crew often get their own private cabin, a real bed, a desk, storage, a private bathroom, and sometimes a window looking straight out onto the passing ice. It's small, but it's warm, it's quiet, and above all, it's yours. A locked door in a world where you're never truly alone. Photos on the wall, a few home comforts smuggled aboard, a pair of headphones. For someone living at work for half a year, that little room is everything. It's the one square of the planet that belongs to them. And on a ship this expensive, they made sure it was a good one. Up top sits the reason this ship can do what it does, the bridge. And it's less like a ship's wheel and more like the cockpit of a spacecraft. Banks of screens track the ice, the weather, the sea floor, and the ship's own systems. Computers can hold this enormous vessel almost perfectly still against howling wind and shifting ice, nudging engines and thrusters automatically, faster than any human could. It's some of the most advanced technology afloat. And a huge chunk of that $200 million is right here. From this one room, A handful of people steer a self-contained town through a frozen sea, reading the ice like a language, deciding where it's safe to push and where it isn't. It's the brain of the whole machine. And here's a twist that sets a ship like this apart. On smaller vessels, if someone gets badly hurt, there's no doctor, just an officer with a manual and a radio. A ship this size and this remote can't take that risk, so it carries its own hospital. A real medical bay with equipment, supplies, sometimes a dedicated doctor on board. Because when the nearest hospital is a week of ice-breaking away, you bring the hospital with you. It's another reason the price is so high, and another sign of what this ship really is. Not just transport, but a complete life support system for the people inside it. Everything a human body might need, thousands of miles from anywhere it could otherwise get it. But ask the crew which part of this $200 million ship matters most to them, and it's rarely the pool or the technology or the hospital. It's the mess, the dining room, the one warm space where 3 times a day everyone gathers around a table and the ship stops being a machine and becomes a group of people. On a voyage this long, a good cook does more for the crew than any amount of expensive equipment. A surprise cake, a proper roast, a taste of home in the middle of the ice. That's the luxury that actually counts. You can spend a fortune on steel and computers, but the thing that keeps a crew together through months of darkness is a hot meal and the people sitting beside them. So, who actually gets to live in a $200 million home? Not just anyone. Crewing a ship like this takes rare skill. The officers on the bridge are ice navigators, people who've spent years learning to read frozen sea, to know which crack will open and which ridge will stop a ship dead. The engineers keep a power plant the size of a small station running flawlessly because out here, a breakdown isn't an inconvenience. It's a threat to everyone's life. A berth on one of these ships is hard to earn, and for the isolation and the skill it demands, it's often very well paid. These aren't tourists enjoying the pool. They're some of the most capable people at sea, and for months at a time, this floating fortress is both their workplace and the only world they have, and that's the strange, quiet truth about this incredible ship. For all its money, all its comforts, all its technology, so it's still a place you can't leave. You can swim, sweat in the sauna, sleep in your own warm cabin, eat well, and want for almost nothing. And you are still months from home in a frozen sea, watching the same ice through the same window, missing the same people. The ship gives you every comfort money can buy, except the ones that actually matter. A walk down a real street, your own bed, in your own home, the face of someone you love in the same room. You can build the safest, warmest, most advanced ship on the planet, and you still can't shorten the distance to the people someone loves. $200 million builds the most comfortable box in the world, but it's still a box. And the crew who live inside it know, better than anyone, that some things were never for sale. So that's what $500 million gets you. A self-sufficient town with a pool, a hospital, and a spacecraft for a bridge. A floating fortress that keeps a few dozen people alive and comfortable at the very edge of the world and still can't give them the one thing they miss most. The next time you see a photo of an icebreaker crushing through the ice, remember, it's not just a machine, it's someone's incredibly expensive, incredibly lonely home. If you want to keep going, the next one is one of my favorites. How crews spend Christmas frozen into the ice at the bottom of the world, thousands of miles from everyone they love. That video's right here. Video's